Christina Universe Citizen presents New Era Religion, Episode 48, May 19, 2022. Alternative Experiences. Amazingly, and to my astonishment, the seemingly inexplicable quandaries that puzzle highly praised physicists, mathematicians, and philosophers, one of whom is Roger Penrose at University of Oxford, who was interviewed by Lex Fridman March 31, 2020, more than 2 years ago, does not raise an otherwise synergetically informed eyebrow, as if those university credentials can praise to the hilt what continues to stymie their own brain power for decades, while geniuses like our Buckminster Fuller's discoveries supposedly don't stand a chance of accreditation for whatever academia's fearful cautionary mentality decides. My experience of some of those baffling questions Penrose asks himself already have been explained with geometrical, geodesically, spherical conceptual models shown in Bucky Fuller's Synergetics, Explorations in the Geometry of Thinking. Anyone can read of this in Synergetics 1023.16, Connections and Relatedness, among many other sections applicable to new era relevance. In Synergetics 302, in quotes, consciousness means an awareness of otherness, end quote. No otherness, no awareness, which interpretively means environment is otherness to self's observations of self and the other, regardless of all the P, R, J, W programming conditioning. Such educated ignorance misinforms a mind and can detrimentally promote layers of redundancies that deteriorate the effectiveness of intellect's potential recognition and validation of the inherently inviolable integrity of the individual. Of course, when mathematicians focus on computing numbers, this becomes a great game between their clever computations. But in that process, they can omit the most relevant conceptualities, which Bucky Fuller's lifelong search for nature's coordinate system succeeded to find. This might be because his curiosity from early childhood was building with efficiency in mind, using geometry, trigonometry, and geodesics that initiated before the computer's evolution, that favors algorithms over vectorial geometry and conceptual models of generalized universe. This is my lay assumption, because I can find no reference to the term algorithm in any of Bucky Fuller's many published books, and the enormous chronology with assistance from E.J. Applewhite's organizational skills. He arranged and compiled this inventory of research in the Synergetics Dictionary, The Mind of R. Buckminster Fuller. Academia's perniciousness can no longer go without saying, since humanity is in great need of comprehending what is going on in the world relative to one's own thought and the critical tasks correlating the universal communications process involving self to other, other to self in our day-to-day survival. Not only are we overwhelmed by belief complex traditions that have grown disproportionately problematic, presently manifesting misinterpretations of freedom are especially devious wherever speech is concerned. A correlation between misinterpretation and political misdirection enables irrational controls over the individual right and freedom to speak, to learn to respect grammar and the etymological formulation of word use over centuries of our humanity's trial and error exploration. It is an inherent need of our evolution species, humans of a mind, to converse about what we know and continue to learn about the nature of us in universe. It is human nature to talk and write about what we know that currently is being supplanted by educating ignorance, using gender preference as subtle political, potentially punitory repression, as this practice invalidates all that describes the most accurate terminology and differences between males and females, for one, and the singular or plural pronouns for another. Pronouns normally address one female or male as she, her, he, him, not they, them, or whatever personal identity crisis someone is personally experiencing of multifarious problems as community conditioning nonsense going on these days. It excludes common sense to include what was not totally understood about anyone's individual plight and each other's adaptive proclivities that involve deeply personal, physical, and psychological adaptations to the local conditions, much of which is attributable to conditioning by communities. Pronoun, according to Oxford University Press Dictionary, is a word used instead of a noun to indicate someone or something already mentioned or known. In example, I, she, this. The noun is singular in this example, not applicable to any one person by the pronouns they, them, regardless of anyone's personalized wish for self-validation or experience self-invalidation relative to their sexual preference, their physical gender, or how they want and need to belong to a group of people, any one of whom may have felt like outcasts from the socio-political powers at play in the contemporary scenario. This gender preference insanity now attacks children at school, forcing them to accommodate the social, political influenced, preferred pronoun agendas process, but in the educated ignorance process promotes grammatically incorrect agendas and more harmful exploitations from the authority that is entrusted to educate children of all ages and uniquely individual personalities. See middle school boys accused of sexual harassment for not using proper pronouns with Jesse Kelly on the Megyn Kelly podcast. With regard to Roger Penrose and his quandary concerning consciousness, obviously, mind consciousness is different from brain consciousness, since the anesthesiologists he alluded to can put the conscious human brain to sleep, supplanting the brain's conscious monitor for that length of time. Taking the sensors away renders the person's consciousness inactive, whereas mind consciousness may correlate consciousness of evolutionary events of generalized universe, and the metaphysical generalized conceptioning field of thought during momentary curiosity concerning underlying principles, which, as we can read in Synergetics 220.02, are only intellectually discernible. The problem with this word principles is the educated ignorance correspondingly to belief complex schemes that refer to general principles, not universes, eternal, generalized principles, while inculcating the slave mentality conditioning, expecting conformity to the dogma, as those mindsets unconscionably propagate the negative asymmetries. This is happening, as a great many problems of consciousness emanate from the womb of permitted ignorance. This is where the established authority factors in punitory expectations as the basis of reality, so that traditional reality is always in a conflict between rewards and punishments, thereby accrediting the God of religions as the overseer and judgment of human behavior. This continues to be the wide-spreading case, having not yet accredited the anticipatory design science mind's generalized content for systemic thought's metaphysical conceptioning. Such generalized conceptioning is of a priori universe's eternal, omniscient mind. In this entire experiential experimental regard, intellect's synergetic involvement is closer correlatively to the womb of total human consciousness of the eternal, omniscient mind's evolving environments. We are encouraged during new era evolution anticipatory concerns with manifesting a true democracy. Awareness of this realizable potential requires comparative bases from more than one resource. My experience of it thus far relies on Bucky Fuller's integration of geometry and philosophy, while not depending on academia's philosophical mentality, which I would not have given any thought to until the comparison became so obvious that the hidden intentions are clearer coincidental to the disseminated news of the predominantly influential authorities. In particular today, as I start anew, is the Lex Fridman interview with Roger Penrose for one, and glimmers of tidbits from variously tuned-in content that is disseminated via YouTube channels and David Barton's book, Original Intent, The Courts, the Constitution and Religion, and news events that arrive from one day to the next. To be continued in Part 2, Episode 49. Relevant links are provided at the end of this video podcast. Thank you